Now that we have heard from 7 distinguished speakers, I'm sure you must be feeling very inspired and full of burning questions. For this panel discussion, we will have Mario van der Meulen, Head of Customer Experience Design and Strategy at Tribal Worldwide. Mario will be our panel moderator. Mario is a design strategist with over 25 years of international experience. He is also the author of Creativity, Change and Design Mindset. In 2012, he was named one of 50 innovation design pioneers in China by CBN Weekly. Blending design, research and strategy, he shapes the now, near, and next for brands to excel in current cultures in this rapidly unfolding future. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Mario, together with our speakers, for a panel discussion session where we will discuss some of the comments and questions that you have posted on our chat platform. Let's hand over the time to you, Mario.
Thank you, Aznan. And hello, DTUX 2021 from our hybrid environment. We are both live from Singapore, hence the masks, but we also have our speakers that have dialed in. I'll first reach out to some of you. Andrea, you're a trooper. You're in California, and yet you join us live. Thank you for that. Micah, Randy, it's good to see you guys at a distance. We've been collecting and kind of keeping an eye on the reactions and the feedback that you shared with us, and there's some interesting questions that are surfacing. Andrea, I'll start with you, if you don't mind. Thank you for unpacking that new buzzword that suddenly started coming out of nowhere and everywhere in the same time, metaverse. I appreciated personally how you also seem to be of the opinion that the A's in AI and AR need to swap, and that we need to treat artificial intelligence as an augment to our own intelligence. And some of our viewers have picked up on these things. How would you, in your words, measure the success of living both in the digital and the actual realm? What are measures of success that you feel are important?
Well, it's so great to be here from San Francisco. So thank you to the conference for having me. And I wanted to talk about the answer to the question. One of the things that you judge is whether life is better off now than it was before. And here's one rule of thumb. If all you're doing is replacing something with something that is worse, or you're judging something just based on efficiency, then you have not done justice to it. So for instance, if you think that education is pointing a camera at a boring person reading a book, that's not a digital experience. And unfortunately, what we end up doing, I believe, is judging the success of something like, in education, did people memorize just as well with a boring person having a camera pointed to them as they did with a boring person in a classroom? So to me, the biggest metric is to sit down with your team and say, are we addressing better questions? Instead of saying, are we getting things to market faster? Are we turning inventory over? Those are yesterday's questions. And if you're using today's digital technologies to simply answer yesterday's questions, you haven't done it. You should be asking yourself, I don't know, I work with Stitch Fix, which is a company in San Francisco. They use AI. They can anticipate your buyer's needs, right? Why even have warehouses? Why worry about how fast you're getting to the warehouse and doing it digitally using AI for that? It should be, let's have, I don't know, zero inventory. What would that world be like? When you're asking edgy questions and getting great results, then you've done justice to this digital, physical, phygital world. That's my clear answer.
Oh, thank you for that. And I'm completely on board with that. Reframing the problem is a critical role for both strategists and designers. And identifying when are we just translating something physical digital and think we solved it, that it starts there. Thank you for that. We also heard from the corporate world, if I may label it as such, Lisa, But what I appreciated in your presentation was that you're looking for language that can bring sort of a contextual clarity to all these techniques that we're using in user experience or in product design. And I'm referring to what you were describing as the swipe right. What could be sort of the 3 top factors in your experience that will see your consumer swipe right?
Cool. Thanks for the question. I think, to be honest, I wouldn't have said it's really any different than what is the swipe right in the physical world. And I think not 3 in any particular order, but I think emotion, and then connection or affinity, and then I wouldn't underestimate visual intrigue. And so I'll talk about those 3 just really quickly. I think emotion, instantly you get that smile, you get a giggle, you get a laugh, maybe disgust. You just want to understand more, it's gut. And then when I think about context and affinity, I think everyone wants to belong. So you want to group with people who are kind of like you, or maybe it's the same ideology, or maybe it's the same things you've been thinking and you want to find connection, whether that's physically or digitally. And then when I go to visual intrigue, I think we're bombarded by so many images today. And we're all just used to looking at media, but sometimes there's just that thing you have to click on. It's an image you're familiar with, and then there's just something that's changed in that's just so visually intriguing. And I think of what people put on their Pinterest or put on Instagram, it's just that one instant image, and I wouldn't underestimate the power of that. So I think those 3 things, to be honest, it's similar, when you're in a bar and something piques your eye, I think it's the same thing.
Right, and here you are doing it again, bringing this context on. This is what we mean. This is how you should think about it. I also agree. I'm probably because I'm a graphic designer by education, but the visceral effect. UXers tend to sort of depreciate that because we're really looking at bringing value, functionality, end-to-end journeys. But I wouldn't want us to skip over the fact that people notice us because we viscerally attract them. And if the function of what we design, if the journey of what we design is fluent, that will add to the experience. But it starts with that visceral appeal. Thank you. One of my first highlights today was hearing from you, Young-Hong. I feel that the journey that you shared with us, where you are and how you think about these things, the maturity you brought to that at your age already makes me envious that I wasn't able to do that at your age. There were a lot of reactions specifically on how do you determine these values as an organization. You can have them as an individual. Now, how do you root and then scale that in an organization? What are some tips and advice that you can give to that?
Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for your question. And I think at the start of when you start a company or when you are still smaller in size, I think a lot have to be what kind of personality that you have. I think the best way is to really be true to yourself and really understand what do you stand for. Because to me, honestly, there's no right or wrong culture. There's no bad or good culture. There's only authentic or not or being superficial. Because I think that when you are being authentic, you are really attractive. Because what you say and what you do can really connect with people. If your organization is all about results, there's nothing wrong. You can tell your staff, oh, we are all about results. We want to achieve a lot of results in the time we are here. There's nothing wrong. It will be all about that. But if that is not who you are, I think it's very unbearable when you try to be like that. So the first thing is to be true. And when you come out and say about who you are, and this will connect with people who are out there who are looking at you. and they want to join you, they want to be part of you, because I feel that people want to belong. They want to belong. So, we, organization like us, SME, we probably only need maybe 50 to 100 people at the start. So we are not trying to hire everyone. So I think you really have to zoom in to the kind of people. They are out there waiting for you. So the first thing I think is to follow who you are. And when you find similar people who are like you, this culture becomes stronger and stronger. So I think that is the more practical way of building a culture and values.
Thank you. Amplifying the shared beliefs,
Yes,
and building on that.
Yeah.
It's a core branding lesson, but equally important that the founders, those that bring the energy to bring a brand to market, that sits in their own truth. I completely agree. Yeah. Joycelyn, you were given a task that I believe few designers will ever face. Design something for everyone. We typically have briefs coming in from clients that say, my target audience is everyone, but in your case, you cannot argue that. Where we would push back to our clients saying, no, you need focus, you need to pick the 1, 2, 3 that you really need to nail. You're really not in a position to do that when you design an app such as Trace Together. How do you get ready for such an endeavor?
It's really a challenge for the team to design for a wide spectrum of users, and it's not just age, right? Because we have young users who are tech savvy and they would know certain things about the app, like if you swipe right, something could happen. But we have less tech savvy users as well. So I think one principle was to design for the extreme. Yeah, and we have to acknowledge that, there are some users who say, you can make these buttons smaller and you can squeeze more things in, but that makes it less tappable for people with maybe mobility issues. Yeah, so while holding the principle of designing for the extreme, what I learned was also to hold another principle, which is to examine what is true to the product, right? So if our purpose is to increase the accuracy and speed of contact tracing, would this design still serve that? So I'll just share a quick example, which I shared in my presentation just now as well. Now we have to do like QR check-ins to places. Yeah, and for people with visual impairments, it's difficult for them to do that because they don't know where the QR is, they have to just wave their phone around. Yeah, and actually there is a way to help them by using a GPS function in your app. And then that shortlists certain locations for them, and then they can scan and they can just tap and check in. Yeah, but if I apply the second principle of going back to what are the principles of the product, what's the aim? Yeah, which is to help increase like the accuracy and speed of contact tracing. And a lot of people onboard the app for this aim only because they believe that we design with privacy in mind. And if we do cater to people with disabilities in this case, by turning on like the GPS function, we may lose a big pool of other users who really hold privacy to the core and feel that if anything that's GPS related in the app, they wouldn't use it. Yeah, so like it's kind of balancing these two principles, designing for extreme and also knowing what's core to the product, and then make like a case by case kind of decision. Yeah, and trying to explain these trade-offs to the public in whatever ways we can. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. These are valid pointers, because a challenge like yours, I've not come across myself. So you've helped me here too. Thank you for that. Ruben, you are our next speaker. Honestly, I was not aware that Capitaland has that many initiatives and channels and explorations in combining both the digital and the physical, and taking advantage of all that real estate and all the users in the real estate that you would have. A question that came out was, since you're so close to working with these different systems and different ecosystems, what do you believe is a future trend for the digital and physical ecosystem interaction?
Okay, thank you for the question, Mario. I think it's a very interesting question because things are evolving so quickly in the digital world. It's kind of really hard to predict or to anticipate, where the economy is going. But in my own personal view, where I see the future trends of digital is going, I see a strengthening of machine learning and AI. A lot of the digital platforms that we build, a lot of emphasis have been placed on automation. And we introduce technology that surrounds itself with fixed set of rules that determine certain set of outcomes. I think where the future go is where the technology will start kicking in and artificial intelligence will kick in to help us determine what outcome we aspire to. So I think that's where I think the future trend of digital ecosystem will head towards. The second thing is voice commerce, meaning now we can call on to buy something just using our voice. If you see where the automobile industry is going, you use voice command to determine where you want to go next. So I do think that the future of e-commerce or social commerce or online, offline hinge very much on voice commerce and also facial recognition. When you walk into the store, it could be a totally cashless environment where you don't even need to whip out your mobile wallet. And you can say, hey, I would like to purchase that, and that will happen, whether online or offline. And we all know that the future is coming sooner than later due to the onset of COVID-19. So the whole process of digitalization is accelerated in many folds as we would anticipate. Yeah.
Correct. There's a valid trend here to be highlighted in that all the technology and all the devices and the computers that we're so familiar with, they will start to disappear. They will be either cloud-based, they will be built in our environment, or they'll be on or inside our own bodies. So something for the UX designers out there, our future is less about interfaces and more about value bringing during interactions that don't involve clicks, taps, or swipes anymore. Because the only time we will see an interface is when they are truly needed. And in my opinion, that will be only when they can deliver a value. Thank you, Ruben. Randy, I'm going to switch it over to you. This was an interesting unpacking of ambitions that you shared with us at Grab, because what I thought I identified was that where typically companies focus on research at the point of interaction, the customer is using my product, you have been talking about expanding that much broader and measuring sort of at journey level, end to end. Hence, the most anticipated question I had for you did come through. What are examples of some of the research methodologies and the remote research methodologies that you now apply to arrive at this kind of data?
Yeah, sure. So the remote research methodologies have, many of these existed prior to COVID, to the pandemic, but the degree to which we rely on them and the emphasis or attention we put in sort of the craft of them, in a way, has changed. Right? So first, we do observational research of customers using products. Like you might imagine, in a controlled research environment or an informal one, you see someone using the app, you may be looking over their shoulder, you may be standing next to them. Researchers are taking notes, they're maybe giving prompts or questions in certain scenarios. In formal environments, historically, we would also, record these sessions and or live stream them to participants in other geographies. That was really about making it easier to find, go back and review notes, find insights in the past, or create like a opportunity for others in the organization to observe research almost ambiently. But the core team members were really there in person. And so the shift then is to thinking about where the core researchers are placed, sort of geographically, and then who is participating in the research. So you've shifted that model so that on the ground, sort of operating team members, largely from outside our own, design and research teams, but operating teams could facilitate and enhance these research activities. So they're able to get participants into the research environment that is now, same technology, same methods applied slightly differently, emphasizing the remote interaction of the researchers doing this kind of observational research. All kinds of caveats come with this. It's certainly a less personal experience. There's a bunch of considerations, but that's something that we were doing previously. We just kind of twisted it 30 degrees, and spend our time and energy in different parts of it in order to make it work remotely. Another, though, is something that I think we had largely kept at arm's length, I would say, which was putting sort of prototypes in remote testing tools. I couldn't tell you how old usertesting.com is at this point, 15 years, 20 years. It's been around for quite some time at this point. And I think there was largely a degree of dissatisfaction with the quality of some of these tools and what they made possible. But I think there's a couple of things that happened. One, just plain need, right? The world changed and is different. You have to consider the possibilities of tools like this. The other is that a number of other tools have, developed and offer some great alternatives. So very early in the pandemic, we started doing trials with numerous tools that would allow you to deliver prototypes and other validation-centric sort of methodologies to customers, in some remote asynchronous way. And we tested a number of these, and we found one that we were really quite happy with. It's called Maze. It's a great product, and MAZE. And that's not a paid endorsement, by the way. What is so powerful about this tool, though, is not only its ability to sort of load up your prototypes and create sort of scenarios and journeys in which you might, have particular prompts or questions along the way and then get great quantified insights or summaries of qualitative things, throughout. But it's actually, and I think it's so amazing, when you construct tests in this tool, it really educates you about the methodology that this particular test is intended to use. So it allows less experienced researchers or even our product designers directly or product managers to not only participate in the construction and the design of some tests and experiments, but to learn about how to do those things better by interacting with the software. And so it's become this really powerful part of the suite for not only operating research, in a distributed way, but also enhancing our understanding of a variety of research methodologies. On top of that, it does a number of other methodologies as well. You can essentially, conduct, 5-second message tests in it, or more detailed, survey trees and a number of things, and then synthesize the insights you get from those methods into sort of singular reports that are also, calling back to your earlier points about the function of aesthetics, that are really attractive, easy to consume, travel fluidly around the organization. And that makes it really powerful as a way to get understanding of customer behavior into other people's hands. Yeah.
Thank you, Randy. Yeah, you're putting Agile on an extreme road test here, right? Recognizing what are methodologies available, but then also adapting them, tweaking techniques to fit sort of the reality that you now need to work with. And I've also picked up on the courage to use prototypes and learn from those right away. That is also, that's a value, because quite often in my own experience, my clients and my brands would be hesitant already to commit to a prototype to learn from that. So another great piece of advice is start making and learning as you go. Thank you for that. Micah, what time is it where you are now? Because you're in Europe, I believe.
I am. It's almost 6 a.m.
Ooh, early start for
Very
you
early morning.
today. Thank you
Yes,
for
absolutely.
joining us. And thank you for bringing attention to something often is often a need that emerges when it's too late. I've made a product in an agile way. I've used the latest methodologies to really optimize and to be functioning in real time, but my business cannot keep up. My business is not aligned to it. People did recognize that. There's a curiosity around, now that COVID hit, with all these models that you quickly introduced us to, was there one particular that seems to have more traction, that is the popular go-to COVID model? In your view, has that happened?
I think obviously the digital shift. I mean, that's a very obvious one, because what you see is that even though people had a website, maybe having a website doesn't necessarily mean that you're ready for a digital shift. And I think that's a huge differentiator. And many organizations started to realize that, like, oh yeah, I mean, I can have a website, but how does that really interact with my customers? What am I offering there? What do I need to do behind the scenes in a very different way to offer the right customer service that is different in an offline world versus an online world? So I would say the digital shift is definitely the one that got the most attention.
It makes sense, right? That there's our habits have changed. We've used more of the digital. Has that been something that fell on the P&G radar, so to speak? And have there been learnings or adaptations that the organization has done? Lisa?
Absolutely. And I think what you were saying, the digital shift, not just in the way that people are finding products or what have you, but just like living and breathing as a consumer digitally. But I think something as well that Micah was just mentioning is, I think back a couple of years ago, or more than a couple of years ago, like you'd put up a website and it was quite a static thing, like not seeing it as a living dialogue. And, I think there's nothing worse when you go see some of these assets and the last time it was updated was, 2019. That's not really an authentic digital experience. It's something that you're meant to be engaging in. So I think a lot of the conversation now is how do you have that authentic experience up there, but really be open to the dialogue, the communication directly with the consumer, and figure out, how to keep pivoting and building your brands and your products. So I see it as much more, it used to be a little bit more one way. Now it's very much a living, breathing experience, which I think is a big difference.
Thank you. The theme of shift really comes quickly into these kind of conversations. I've recognized that at the government, shift is happening all the time. What's your personal experience with that, Jocelyn?
My personal experience with the shifts.
The shifts to be more visible, to be more of a face to the general public, really.
Right. I think for the Singapore government, my personal opinion, don't quote the Singapore government, is my view of government comms, like communications previously, was that it's pretty stern, and possibly that was the reason and the image they wanted to give. After a while, they realized that it doesn't connect with the newer generations, and they had to change it up. And I started realizing some of our gov.sg commercials, they either are really good with emotions. I think the recent vaccinations one online in YouTube, those are really good. Going with songs, sometimes a little cheesy, but they do stick with you. And I noticed certain ministries going onto IGs, doing stories, and TikTok. So I see like memes and stuff coming out. So I think that's it may seem like slow progress compared to the private sector, but I must say it's huge progress in the government.
Correct.
And slowly moving towards a more human touch.
Thank you for pointing that out. That it may seem as if the organization is joining a bandwagon, but for this organization, for this institution to do that, that is a radical, radical shift. What would you anticipate to be the next shift for Green Dot, Young-Ho?
I think for digital wise, I think that will affect the every businesses, and for Green Dot wise, when we try to go digital, we have a lot of problems. And firstly, I'm not a very digital person to start with, so I learned a lot from today. And we have a lot of elderly staff. So when we try to, like I do agree with what Andrea says, it's just sometimes it's not just about a website, it's just not about an app. No, it's about the whole processes. Are you all ready for digital? So that's one of the big change for us. But I think in the future, I think that one of the big trends that's coming up, of course, I must say, is plant-based. And second thing I think is people are trying to simplify things. So things have to be simpler, get simpler and simpler, because we have so much information, so much distraction every day. So I think it's a race to see who can get messages across simply, who can get products across very nice and easy way, pleasant way. I think, and ultimately, and also to tap into people's emotion. I think that's going to be a future trend.
Thank you. The next question, I'm going to do a bit of a round robin. Our audiences is largely students and a mix of people that are considering to shift in an industry such as user experience, be it design, be it strategy. And hence there's a lot of interest and ask around, where do I start? What would I be needing to do to become a good UX designer / strategist? What are sort of the topics that each of you feel are important? And I'll start with you, Andrea.
So I actually found a lot of the other presenters' conversations really, really stimulating. And I think that where you start is to come to conferences like this and just hear what's going on all around the world. So that's number one. But I am an expert in future-proofing companies, whether it's a small and medium-sized company or global companies. And so I would say that everyone should start with, I have 4 words: see, learn, decide, commit. And this morning I was on a panel with Saxo Bank from Copenhagen for Copenhagen FinTech. And he was talking, that CIO was talking about where they came up with this really cool idea for a VR, virtual reality-based financial product. And it started off with some younger people who were on the staff who had a passion. They were very committed to something. And the team, the senior team, observed the level of commitment, which it reminded me of what Lisa said at P&G, that there was so much fervor for transparency. There was so much fervor for bringing ESG goals and purpose to companies, and to be able to use technology to enable people to have much more transparent conversations. So he said, you start with where commitment is. So I would say if you're coming into the field of UX, to understand where empathy comes from, I believe it's 2 places. It's seeing outside of the 4 walls. It's being very, very curious. We call it adaptive intelligence, just learning. And it's also getting deep into your heart so that you really understand what's important to you and use that as an initial stimulus to bring your curiosity out. So that's what I believe, to see and to commit, to marry them, and then to use as much exposure to others as possible.
Beautifully put. Thank you, Andrea. Ruben, for yourself, or as advice to others, what would you recommend to get a deeper and more meaningful understanding of this whole UX, CX offer?
Okay, I think we have to put the customer. Okay, so I'm coming from a very commercial.
Please do.
Right? So put the customer in the center. So I think, from where we come from, CapitaLand, we are very physical, right? We are the largest retail operator, right? We run workspaces, very physical oriented. But now as we start to digitalize, we realize that we have to create a strong customer experience online and offline. Now, then the question is, how do we do that? So we do that by putting our customer, when they enter the mall or when they take information online, right? Do we create chatbots, or do we have chat dialogues to connect them, right, on the services that they want or the products that they are looking for? So I think that's where my view is to place the customer right in the center. Think about what the customer wants and how they feel when they interact with you, right, regardless, online, offline, right? Then from there, you can start connecting with them and start, articulating your product and services that are relevant, right, that allows them to enjoy their journey, where they are shopping in our malls, or when they go to work in our CapitaLand properties, or they go online and search for a space to rent, right? So I think the universe on where we are going towards right now is to just look at simply, like what Yong Hong said, keep things simple, right? Focus on what the customer wants, and then really do test and learn, right? And understand how we can create a good design to engage them in the future. Yeah, so that's how I view it.
Thank you. I liked how you walked the thin line between the what, but pulled it back to, no, it's actually the who. Keep in mind who you're designing for. I think among our group of panel speakers, it would be someone like yourself, Randy, who on a daily basis meets with an eclectic group of people doing this profession called UX. And constantly interviewing and screening and meeting these people. You may be the most experienced among us in giving advice and tips or pro tips to people that are up and coming in this industry. What would you share with them?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Well, I'll make possibly a controversial statement, but I hope it's sort of additive, in the context of this. Given that I spent, 15 minutes talking about research and understanding users, I want to emphasize that I think that is extremely important and critical, much to Ruben's point, putting the sort of customer at the center. So the controversial point is, I actually think that a fundamental skill that comes from communication design and graphic design that is extremely valuable across all design experiences, and that I think is often underdeveloped or underappreciated among many practitioners, because it is quite distant from, on the surface from other sort of UX methods or UX skills. And it's really about typography. Yeah. Now, why this matters? It's not just about making things look nice, although that is extremely helpful, as you alluded to before. But I think that actually, when trained in the basics of typographic design, we organize information better. We develop a foundational skill about organizing information, which includes not only where it goes in space, but also the sequencing of that information. And you get a view, a very fundamental view on how the amount of content, whether that is text content in this context, but you apply the learning otherwise through video, sound otherwise, the amount of content affects what you can present and how you can present that content to a person at any given time. So you start to understand pacing, information density, information hierarchy. When you're given a paragraph of 300 words, and then you need to pull something out of it, to make a headline or to emphasize a pull quote. These are very, very basic, like page layout design details, but they make you consider what is most important to communicate, and how do you maybe create an entry point that gives someone a certain level of information, and then some deeper interactions or some deeper things that someone spends time with to get a richer experience. And I just think it's a super foundational design skill that applies across many, many contexts. And as complex as our digital experiences have have become. In the pursuit of simplicity, I find that practitioners who really understand typographic design have a far easier time at achieving the level of simplicity that we aspire towards.
Thank you. And both as an old school graphic designer myself, but also as a designer of information architecture, I completely agree that is often almost an oversight or sort of an additional thing that we know how to do because our computers give us so much flexibility in it. But the attention that we can give it can make quite a bit of a difference in how we communicate our information. As a relatively young person still in this industry, Jocelyn, what is your advice when you hear people go, what's it like to be a UX designer? How can I be a better one?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've been getting some people requesting for chats like this, and maybe mid-career switch or fresh grads. And usually I ask them a few questions like, how are you feeling about this dream or ambition of wanting to do a career switch? Then I hear what they say, and I often hear things like I'm quite overwhelmed because they see like UX is a huge spectrum of things, from research to the visual, and then to testing, and then to qualitative and quantitative kind of research data and stuff. Yeah, so when I hear that, okay, they're overwhelmed, then I'll usually ask them, okay, maybe if you have to just pick one to start with, what would it be? Yeah, and then they would say it, and then I ask them, like any concerns and stuff. So actually, I generally go with ask them some questions, and then I don't think there is a right way personally, I don't think there is a right way of entering UX. It's really trying to help or support the person to have an intention in their first step, so that they don't take their first step and think, oh, I'm missing so many things, and they keep feeling anxious. Yeah, so just going in with a clear intention of this is what I want to do, and this is why, and then I will slowly be able to move to different parts of the spectrum.
Thank you. Mike, if I were to check with you, at first thought, we would see things like business models and UX as quite separate. However, I'll be the first one to jump on stage saying, no. If you do UX strategy, business models, business canvases, they're critical to understand and activate. What would be advice that you would give to people that have a curiosity around it? How can they start building up some muscle memory in this?
Yes, and muscle memory around the UX or around the business modeling, what you mentioned.
Or perhaps transferring the advantages of being aware how to work and navigate through business model thinking to UX thinking.
Yeah, for me, indeed, it goes hand in hand. So whenever I work with an organization on creating new business models, it's always immediately together with designers. I mean, our whole team, we actually all call ourselves designers, strategy designers is what we often call it. But it's all about the experimentation, and whether it's building a new app, building a new business model, I really believe it needs to go hand in hand. And the value proposition that you're creating, that's what it's all about. And you need to understand, like, how does that value proposition comes alive to my users, to my customers? But also, how does that play out in the business model? And it's all about creating prototypes. It's about creating prototypes of the actual physical product that you're creating or service that you're creating, but it's also creating prototypes of your business model that could go with that value proposition that you're thinking of. It's all about starting with that customer. What's the job to get done, and what's that product or service that you want to offer? So for me, it really would go hand in hand immediately. And that's where I think most designers love the business model canvas, because it is a prototyping tool. And that's how I really look at it, to use it as a prototyping tool.
Excellent. And on that topic of prototyping, then I'm starting to think collaboration, conversations, building that shared understanding. I appreciate, Young-Hong, that our conversations suddenly shifted to quite technical things and disciplines that you may not be 100% familiar with. But I would like to bring that theme of collaboration and shared understanding back to a question that sits in our Q&A. How do you, as an organization, build that shared understanding around what is fair in terms of salary and compensation, so that you don't create unwanted ripples among your employee base?
Thank you for your question. I think this discussion is about user experience, also design thinking, and I think we talk a lot about design thinking and user experience in terms to the customer. But I really champion in using design thinking in creating experience for our employees also. And we talk a lot about the technical stuff, about user experience, but to me, I feel that one step to be better in design thinking or understanding user experience, I think, is to be more mindful. I think in this world, we have a lot of things that constantly happening. I think if you learn to be more mindful, be more present, like for example, we are sitting here right now, we really enjoy the moment right now, interacting with one another. I think when you are more mindful, you are be able to understand your customers and you are able to see your staff better. As for being fair, I think that ultimately that is very hard to be fair to everyone. So the companies, the leaders have to understand what are the priorities. At this stage, what do you want? Because like for example, during during the COVID period, okay, a lot of elderlies, we let them stay at home and they don't work, but we still pay them. But for the younger staff, they come to work because we still have to operate. We are F&B. If we don't operate, how are the customers coming to our outlet for their meals? So when it comes to this kind of decisions, you have to ask, why they stay at home? They have pay, and we work, and we still get the same pay. So I think it all boils down to what is important in an organization. So I will always say that, look at them like they're your parents. If your parents are working in an organization and your organization let them stay at home, do you want that organization to let them stay at home in this period, or do you want them to let them go out and have the risk of getting the COVID-19? So I think it all boils down to the values and beliefs of the company, and this has to be communicated very clearly to them. That's why I think fairness, in a way, is very hard to achieve, but it's more of what we stand for, and I think that is more important.
Thank you. You made that link again between establishing the values and sharing the importance around it, and that kind of unifies even the friction points of what is fair or unfair. Thank you for that. I'm going to switch it up a little bit now and do perhaps something that our panelists have not had the opportunity. We've all been exposed to each other's presentations. Is there a question that one of my panelists would have for another panelist? Is there curiosity that's burning? I see you're nodding. Jocelyn, go for it. Who do you have a question for? Go ahead and ask.
I'm trying to think.
Okay, who's ready with I'll put you on the spot here now. Yes, Andrea, go for it.
Well, I actually have a question for Jocelyn. We did a project in China last year. Not last year, the year before last, China and the United States, for one of the very large auto companies in mobility. And it was around trust. And we discovered that in the two different cultures, both in China and the United States, in one culture, biometrics and certain user experiences were very cool and made you feel secure. You know, the more the government watched over you, the more secure you felt. This was all before COVID. But in the United States, it was called creepy. We call it Big Brother looking over our shoulder. And so the definition of trust and the user experience and app design, you know, the software design that was related to that were completely different. And we had to do a lot of co-creation to discover that. I was so curious, Joycelyn, about with Trace Together, which sounds phenomenal, how you transcend, you know, like, how do you get permission from the people to feel really that they can trust it as opposed to they're being surveilled or watched?
Cool. Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, it wasn't an easy journey. Yeah, because we had to like feel the ground as we go. Given that COVID happened so quickly, and we really wanted to roll out our products soon. Yeah, to be able to support the situation. Yeah, one big thing that team did all together, so not just design, actually technology and product came together, was to go with privacy by design. So although we use the word design, but it's actually the design of the technology itself, right? That this Bluetooth privacy preserving technology itself, it's robust and it's not easy to be hacked. Yeah. So a little technical sharing is basically how it works is if both our phones have Trace Together, and then my phone will just generally be emitting encrypted user ID like ABC, ABC. And then Mario's phone will pick up like ABC, and then I'll hear like maybe EFG kind of thing, yeah. So, and it's stored in your phone. And so only when you're test COVID positive, then you upload the data. Yeah, so it's not like it can be hacked easily. And even if someone hacks it, they can't discover what ABC, EFG means, because these like, matching is stored in a secure server. So there are like many ways we try to preserve the privacy of our users' data. Mm-hmm. So I think having that as an anchor made us a lot more secure. So when people try to question and see like maybe false news about it, we have a strong anchor, and we open source our code. Yeah, and that had lots of benefits because other countries could use it. Yeah, they could tweak it to what fits their country in terms of like the trust and the culture. But it also made everyone clear they have nothing to hide, right? And yeah, we invited influencers down to examine our app and to examine our token to tell them, yeah, really, we have nothing to hide. So those are some of the things we did. And we also went on the softer side of like communicating what this new technology is about, because many people don't understand and they do think that the government is tracking them. Yeah, so yeah, I don't think that we really tried like many little things, and it's through consistent efforts, I would say, and always listening to the ground. Yeah, I think one of the speakers, maybe Lisa, your talk mentioned feedback. Yeah, so listening very keenly to the ground, to any like ripples of, okay, there might be some mistrust in that feature there. Let's try to see what we can do quickly. Yeah, so yeah. I hope that answers your question.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and having that agility, again, we're talking government institution. This is quite exceptional, but also applaudable that there is that willingness to really quickly react to what is causing tensions, which in return builds the trust. I'm a Westerner myself, so the thoughts that you brought up, Andrea, they were in my mind as well, but I've never felt watched or traced, even though the name is Traced Together. I've never felt imposed upon. In fact, I felt safe. Mm-hmm. Thanks for that sharing. Quick run check with the panelists. Do we have a question for each other?
I have a question for Lisa. Yeah, I mean, you created quite a few products for the digital consumer. Was there any product that you made an assumption and the assumption didn't turn out to be right? And what was your biggest learning from it?
Absolutely. So I think, yeah, all the time, I think we're making assumptions. But then I think in terms of product development, the thing that I've really loved about introducing products digitally is the ability to get feedback almost real time and pivot, which, to be honest, coming from consumer packaged goods, which is a very physical history, once we've put it out on millions of shelves all over the world, it's a lot harder to pivot. And so I think the beauty of being able to have those pivots, and then I think, again, the openness to the feedback. So, consumers are willingly giving feedback in forums. It is really about listening to that feedback, understanding, what messaging maybe we've had that's not clear, that we can make better, what are people really interested in, what intrigues them with our product, and then making those adaptations. So to be honest, I think it's really that growth mindset of being open to pivoting once you put something out there, not just, I've created the best product in the world, let the world enjoy it, because it just doesn't happen that way. And so I think it's that openness and that humbleness to really figure out how can you improve things. And to be honest, as an industrial designer now working, in digital as well, it's incredibly freeing in the sense of just that real-time prototyping, pivoting. It really, I think, helps the design process. So I don't know if I answered it fully, but...
Thank you.
Thanks for that. We have a little bit of time left. I'm kind of juggling between two questions for two different people. Maybe we can squeeze them in really quickly, even if it's a yes or no, Mike. With that experience that you have in talking about business model shifts in the East as well as in the West, how different is that? Do you need to have completely different approaches when you're working in the US and talk about business shifts versus here in Asia? What's your experience for that?
I think, funny enough, because I have teams in different places in the world, indeed, East, West, everywhere. And what I've seen so far is that there isn't that much difference. When we work with it, the creativity, I see it's roughly the same. Where I see the biggest difference is getting feedback on different business model options. That's where I really use different techniques for the different cultures. I mean, I worked in Africa as well. I mean, I worked in Asia, I worked in Europe, worked in the US, and every country requires a different way of asking feedback. As some countries, everyone is super loud. You don't even need to ask for feedback. It will automatically be there. And other countries, you need to have more an anonymous way of feedback giving, where you say, like, let's just write it down and we'll gather all the information later on so no one knows who gave what feedback. And so I think that's where I see the biggest difference between the different cultures, but not as such in using the business model canvas. It's more, how do you get everyone to contribute to developing the business model? That's different.
That's interesting, and then that again gives us that opportunity to, open up our tool belt and really get to grips to the reality of where we are working and who we are working for. Thank you so much to our panelists that have dialed in. Thanks for staying up late or getting up early. Our panelists here on stage with me, I enjoyed our interactions tremendously. I've learned quite a few things, and I'm certain that is something shared with our audiences online. I thank you for your questions, for your sharing and feedback to us. I'm going to hand it over back to Aznan to wrap this morning up. Thank you again, panelists, and have a good day.
Wow, that was an amazing conversation between our panelists and all of you. Let's keep the conversation going online by including us with hashtag DTUX21 or hashtag DTUX Summit 2021 in your tweets or IG stories of interesting or inspiring thoughts from our session today. We'll be looking out for your posts to send out our very special collateral to 5 of you. We have now come to the end of our DTUX Summit 2021 plenary session. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend today's event. We hope that you have gained new insights and ideas from this summit. We also would like to hear about your experience at DTUX21. So do scan the QR code or click on the bit.ly address sent to you in the chat or as shown on the screen. For those of you who have registered for the afternoon breakout workshop session, we regret to inform you that we are not able to accommodate everybody at these sessions as they were oversubscribed. Places were filled on a first-come, first-served basis. For those of you who were successful, please use the link that was sent to your registered email address. These workshops will start around 2:30 p.m., so do check back at your event site for the links to your workshop. Do note that our Women in Design virtual workshop will start at 3:30 p.m. Singapore time. Have a great session this afternoon, and remember that our entire event, this morning's plenary session, as well as the afternoon workshops, will also be available at this event site from the 18th of September right up to the 17th of October. So if you missed any of the discussions or would like to revisit some of them, do log back in again with your usernames and password. We hope that you have enjoyed today's event and we look forward to seeing you again next year. In the meantime, have a great afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. Stay safe and take care.